are under arrest, my lord.
Welcome to another episode of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, where today we are on our 7th in-depth character review, where we look at Mace Windu. Now, Mace Windu has been a highly requested character from you guys, so we are going to be talking about what makes them awesome in the Star Wars universe, as well as their role in the Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video game. But before we can talk about Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, we have to pull up the Hall of Fame and see where we stand so far. In our last video, we looked at Stormtrooper and placed him in the Youngling category. Therefore, we have talked about every single category from Grandmaster to Youngling, so we can go ahead in our further videos and further understand each of these categories when we place characters in them. But looking at all this, let's go ahead and talk about the history of Mace Windu and his legacy. And Mace Windu was born on the planet of Harun Kal, where Mace Windu was a Master Jedi and discovered at a very young age that he possessed abilities that his peers did not, such as the ability to see shatter points in the Force, or in other words, he had the ability to see the devastating weaknesses in his adversaries, which has been deemed a skill that only so many possessed. He trained in the ways of the Jedi Order after the death of his family, and eventually created his own style of combat known as Vapod, a technique which required strict control emotionally and physically due to the nature of utilizing overwhelming power, and it was believed that only Yoda and Count Dooku could outspar him. Mace Windu's story eventually came to an end after discovering Palpatine was a Sith Lord, and after challenging him to a brief duel, Mace Windu had Palpatine in a position where he was at the mercy of Windu. While Windu was about to execute Palpatine, Anakin Skywalker, due to his unstable state, cut off Mace Windu's arm, which led to Palpatine being able to unleash Force Lightning onto Mace Windu. During this attack from Palpatine, Mace Windu was launched out of the Chancellor's office, where it is believed and assumed that he died. And in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, we see Mace Windu carry over his Jedi philosophy of exercising Vapod, as well as using his talent with Shatterpoint. And now we go ahead and talk about how we unlock Mace Windu in our game. And there are quite a couple ways that you can unlock him. Chromium packs are one way. If you want to spend your crystals and roll the dice, you can get Mace Windu in there. Another way is through Bronzium packs. Despite the low drop rates for character shards, you can see Mace Windu come through there. Also, if you need to go through dark side light side battles, you can find them on 2E. Lastly, the most popular way to farm Mace Windu is on Cantina Battle 4A, where you can get the most shards of Windu in the fastest time for the free-to-play player. Now let's go ahead and talk about the good stuff, where we talk about the character before mods and abilities are even in the situation. Now, Mace Windu has a couple of pros, and he also has been retouched by the developers quite a few times with a recent change made not too long ago. One thing is that Mace Windu is in the top 25% in his maximum damage, which comes from his second attack. The average maximum damage in this game is 4,747, and we see Mace Windu at 5,978, putting him at number 20. Next, we see he's in the top 30% in armor, which is a great trait to have for a tank. We see that he's in the top 30%, with the average being 204. Mace Windu sits at 225, which puts him at number 28. Now moving on to Tenacity. For a tank and for a character of his abilities, you want to make sure that he will not be stunned. Well, before mods and abilities are considered, he is in the top 15% in Tenacity. The average being 27%, we see Mace Windu at 33%, which keeps him in that top 15% range. Now next, although not as important after the most recent rework of Mace Windu, we see he's in the top 30% in Potency, with the average being 27%. Windu sits at 36%, and the reason why Potency does not matter as much for Windu anymore is because in the most recent rework, they made his passive ability, also known as Shatterpoint, irresistible. So you cannot resist that ability, so therefore Potency should not matter anymore. Now let's move on to the average or the okay stats of Mace Windu. We see that he is just slightly above the average for health. The average health in this game is 16,511, with Mace Windu being at 16,810, so just ever so slightly above that average, which puts him at number 36. Now he's also slightly below the average in protection. The average protection in this game is 15,821, and Windu is seen at 14,541, which puts him at number 43 in protection for our game. Now let's move on to the bad stuff of Mace Windu, and he's kind of got a couple things going on here. The biggest thing that's really drawing him back is the slow speed. The average speed in this game is 122, while Windu is seen at 111, which puts him at number 65. And although abilities are not considered in this data, we do see that he does have a passive ability, Shatter Point, which does grant turn meter bonuses depending on certain situations, which we will talk about soon. Now the next con is that we see Mace Windu having some low basic damage in this game. The average basic damage is 3,849, with Mace Windu being below that at 3,448, which puts him at number 66, which is kind of funny since he was one of the last Jedi defeated before Order 66 was implemented. Not sure if there's any relation there. Now lastly, we see that he is one of the lowest characters in the game in terms of armor penetration. The average armor penetration is 38, with Windu being at 15, which puts him in the bottom 10% for armor penetration, which means that he will not be able to pierce through armor of heavy characters such as Royal Guard and Old Ben as much as other characters such as General Grievous. Now let's move on to his kit, because he has a very interesting kit and the developers did put some work into his abilities when they first reworked him. And in this rework, they really took Mace Windu's philosophy at heart when making all these attacks and abilities, where we see the first one being known as Invincible Assault. And with this, he deals physical damage, and if he is above 50% health, this attack can deal 50% more damage. Now if he's below 50% health, he can recover an equal amount up to 70% of the damage he dealt. So hypothetically, we see that this attack can deal roughly 3,120 to 3,448, but he has the possibility to hit up to 5,172 before mods or critical damage are calculated, and he also has the opportunity to gain 2,413 health on a hit when he's low on health. So a lot of conditionals here that does make this basic attack quite nice. Although it is one of the lowest maximum basic damages in the game, it is still a great ability to have when in certain situations. Moving on to his next ability, this is his highest dealing attack, known as Smite, and it also possesses an attribute which only so many characters have in this game, which is stripping buffs and positive status effects. And we can see this attack doing 5,410 to 5,978, but there are some drawbacks to this attack. Same thing with like Qui-Gon Jinn, the AI tends to use this ability on enemies who have foresight, which essentially makes him waste his buff stripping abilities, which is kind of sad. However, in the hands of someone like you or me, it does become more useful, but I just want to point out how the AI tends to use his abilities. Now next, moving on to Vapod, his Jedi philosophy when it comes to fighting. It reflects this nature of overwhelming force by granting all Jedi allies 20% offense and a 9% critical chance. But with that, there is also the opportunity to recover 5% of their maximum health when scoring a critical hit. But usually, this is overlooked by other leaders such as Anakin, who has a bigger offense bonus to Jedi, clones, and other characters outside of those factions, as well as the ability to gain advantage. So you probably will not see Mace Windu leading that often. Now moving on to Shatterpoint, his unique ability that he discovered when he was a young one. And just like his history, he is able to expose enemies and their weaknesses, meaning at the start of each turn, he has a 45% chance to expose a random enemy until the end of his turn. And this cannot be resisted as of the most recent rework, which is very nice. So essentially he does his damage, but if someone has exposed, he can strip away up to 20% of one's health, which could be quite deadly if it comes up frequently. Also with that, he gains 25% turn meter whenever he attacks the exposed enemy. But with this very unique ability, there are some drawbacks to this. And one is that, again, the AI does not know how to use this, and it generally does not attack the person who is exposed. It is more focused on those who have buffs like foresight or offense up. So when facing Mace Windu in the hands of the AI, you really won't see him take advantage of these exposing opportunities. Now let's get out of here and talk about the gear requirements, and his maximum gear is 10, and he's actually not that bad the gear, which is quite nice. The average raid gear needed in this game is about 2 to 3, and Mace Windu is seen on the lighter side of the raid gear with needing only 2 pieces, one of them being the Mark V droid collar and the other one being the Mark VII Nubian scanner. And also another great thing is he is way below average for purple gear. The average in this game is 720 pieces of purple gear, and Windu needs 450, so definitely below that average, which puts him at number 79 in terms of purple gear requirements. And besides purple gear salvage for raid gear, he has no other 50-piece purple gear requirement, which is very nice compared to characters like Anakin Skywalker, where you need tons and tons of 50 sets of stun cuffs. And in here, he only needs a couple of assortments of purple gear, but not much of a single piece. The most popular, and I use that kind of lightly because it's not that popular for him, but he needs about 40 of the Mark IV Sorasu keypads, and he also needs 40 of the Mach 4 stun glove salvage, which isn't that bad at all. Not like other characters like Anakin Skywalker, where they just eat purple gear for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now moving on to blue, green, and white, not too much going on here, but there are a couple of things I want to point out. In terms of blue gear, he's below average, nothing crazy there. In terms of green gear, he is kind of high. He's above average at number 22, needing 94 pieces of green gear. And in white gear, not as crazy, but he is above average at number 19, needing 115 pieces of white gear. So just something I want to point out since it is distinguishing compared to other characters. After talking about the hard numbers of the game, let's go ahead and get to the subjective part of my review, where we talk about random tips and setup recommendations and farming tips as well. Now, in terms of mods, I definitely recommend let's get some health mods in here in order to compensate for his somewhat average health, and also if you can get mods that have a secondary primary ability for protection and speed, that will definitely address his issue in terms of low speed and mildly below average protection. Now, when using him as a leader, I mentioned this as before, his leader ability isn't really that useful, and Anakin would be a much better leader if you want to lead Jedi into the battle with an offense bonus. And he might not be the most desired Jedi compared to all of the other ones available. At one point during the Yoda event, there were not many characters available for the free-to-play player, and like myself, I actually farmed Mace Windu. So although he's a character that you don't need to drop everything right now and farm him, he actually might be someone worth farming in the long run due to the fact that we see the developers picking him up constantly to make him better than before. He's had 2 reworks so far, and there may be a possibility he can get picked up again due to the fact that he is a very popular character in the Star Wars universe. So let's go ahead and summarize all this and go into the ranking. And despite Mace Windu's awesome history, he is a character that is in the middle of the road in this game. He isn't horrible, but he's also nowhere near amazing and gets drowned back compared to all of the Jedis like Anakin, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Aayla Secura, which are now available for the free-to-play player. Even his role in the game is quite odd since he does not possess the physical attributes of a tank such as high protection and high health, although he does have the low speed. His main job is to direct attention to him from his allies, which makes him a quasi-tank mainly because you may not want him to constantly get his expose on you. However, Shatterpoint does come in handy here and there when being used in your hands, and the fact that it cannot be resisted after the most recent rework makes him more viable than before. His ability to dispel makes him an accessible and fast farm for those who need a dispelling character for the raid when playing in Phase 1. But due to his middle-of-the-road status, he may get overlooked quite easily, but the possibility of constantly being picked up and reworked until he is great like Anakin Skywalker is a great possibility here. Now for the moment you've all been waiting for, let's go ahead and pull up the Hall of Fame and see where Mace Windu can stand. With every title being claimed, we have a better idea about where characters can stand after a review. And I must say, Mace Windu was a very hard character for me to categorize due to his middle-of-the-road attributes. And because of this, we are going to be putting Mace Windu in the Knight category. So he is getting a slight demotion from his status in the Star Wars movies. So with all this in mind, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and feel free to comment down below on a character you'd like to see in the future, or comment about this current review if you disagree with me, agree with me, or you'd like to talk about some possible rework attributes that we can put on Mace Windu. And as always, please like, comment down below, subscribe, share this video if you can, and we will talk again later. Peace out.